The Buffalo Bills slayed the dragon, but can they do it twice? Welcome in to the AFC Squad.
You are talking ball with the AFC Squad. From the Chiefs to the Bills, the Ravens to the Texans, and everyone else around the AFC, it's the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network bringing you scoops, breakdowns, and the most comprehensive preview of the upcoming weekend for hard-hitting AFC football with our harder-hitting takes. Buckle up, it's the AFC Squad, and we have a seat for you. No hurt feelings allowed. Squad up. You're part of the AFC Squad.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into the AFC Squad. Grab your favorite beverage or snack and sit back, relax as we break down the AFC on a weekly basis. Week 12 of the NFL season's here. We're going to recap a little bit of Week 11. There's a lot to break down here. I'm Cody Rourke, host of Locked On Broncos, joined with some new faces here this week. It was like to change it up. We got Zach Hicks, one of the hosts over there, Locked On Colts. We got Mike Debate, as always, representing for the Locked On Patriots podcast. Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens, and a first-time appearance from Locked On Jets host John Butchko. A lot seemingly going on there in New York. We'll get to that here, obviously, on today's AFC Squad, which is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Let's obviously get the elephant out of the room here as we focus on the grand scheme of the AFC. And once again, reminder, folks, if your favorite team isn't talked about as much or you don't like what we have to say, complain to your host show. We always try to get everybody on here. We can fit up to 10 people in here. I got to bang that drum every single week here. But the Kansas City Chiefs undefeated streak is officially over. The Buffalo Bills winning a little bit of a thriller there late. Josh Allen on 4th and 2, taking matters into his own hands and punching it in for a touchdown. And finally, the Chiefs, they've fallen. And I think the bigger question we're going to have here, folks, is, okay, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills said it last week. It doesn't matter about the regular season. It matters about the postseason, which is true. But somebody had to end the Chiefs streak, and luckily it was Buffalo. Let's start things off here with Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. Zach, your thoughts on, obviously, Buffalo ending the streak there. How important is it? And do you agree with Joe that really, hey, got to find a way to do it in the postseason?
I mean, we've seen Buffalo do this the last couple times they've played in the regular season against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, they've typically been the better team in the regular season matchup with the Chiefs, even when the Chiefs have been playing their best football in the regular season. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great win. Obviously, you want to celebrate a great regular season win, beating the Kansas City Chiefs, back-to-back Super Bowl champs who were undefeated coming into this game. Obviously, it's a great win, but like Joe said, it's about the playoffs. I mean, Josh Allen's been doing this at such a high level for so many years now where, yeah, it's about the playoffs at this point. So fantastic win for the Buffalo Bills, are certainly showing that they're one of the best teams in the AFC here, and taking down the Kansas City Chiefs, a big part of that. But yeah, Joe was completely right. It really comes down to the playoffs for this Bills team. And I think everyone in that locker room knows it at this point too.
We got two AFC East representatives here this week, and I feel like it's the first time we've had that happen. Mike Debate, obviously, you guys see the Buffalo Bills twice per week. Did you expect this? I mean, I felt like you mentioned it as well. Like you've seen a dynasty, covering the Patriots. You've seen what it's like in Kansas City. Obviously, been in that same conversation there. What is it that you saw about Buffalo specifically that's like, hey, all right, they could be the Kingslayer here?
Well, again, I think you put the game in Josh Allen's hands, and he proved that he can get the job done and be able to win games when he needs to. This Buffalo Bills team will grind you out, and that's exactly what you need to do to slay the giant, like you said. I've watched teams do that to the New England Patriots. You take what they do well, and you put it back on them. You put them on their heels early. Everyone figured the New England Patriots were going to finish 2007 19-0. They finished 18-1 because the New York Giants took what the Patriots were doing and they put it back in their face, and they did not allow them to get up off the mat. That's what you have to do to beat a team like Kansas City. Kudos to the Buffalo Bills. They were able to do it. I know Zach's fan base, my fan base, were pretty happy about it, because you look at the longest win streaks now. Indianapolis still sitting there at number 23 at 23. The Patriots still have the 21 and the 18-game win streak. So, yeah, there is a little bit of celebration when it comes to those two fan bases. I know they're still popping champagne down in Miami every time an undefeated team falls. But, look, bottom line, Joe is absolutely right. You did it once. Let's see you do it again. And that, again, is going to have to be in the postseason. If they're able to slay the giant this time, there may be no stopping the Buffalo Bills en route to a Super Bowl championship. But right now, they're going to enjoy this win, but they've got to move on to the next one very quickly, because now the target is on their backs. They're the ones that brought down Goliath. Can they keep that momentum going?
We're going to shift gears here to another game in the AFC North. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens. As we all know, those matchups, it's a bloodbath. It's fun to watch. It's physical. There's drama. There's fisticuffs. Kevin Ostreicher, Locked on Ravens. Unfortunately, your Ravens fell a little bit short, 18-16, and can't help but look back and say, like, what's going on with Justin Tucker? It makes one of those field goals. It's a different situation in that game.
Yeah, it was brutal. And honestly, it even goes far beyond Justin Tucker, but that's going to be the biggest storyline because we've seen Justin Tucker, sorry to Zach and Mike, be the greatest kicker in NFL history. I know Vinatieri gets some love too, and I'm not trying to discredit that, but obviously for me, it's Tucker. But at the end of the day, this has been not even just a 1 year thing this year. Even last year, he struggled from 50 plus. And we're now seeing that again this year. But he's also missing from inside of 50. And you're right, Cody. It's, 6 points and a 2-point loss. And you look back, he just makes one of those field goals. If you want to play that game, then obviously Baltimore wins this one and the game looks differently. But those AFC North Ravens Steelers games are always just the weirdest games I ever watch. I mean, and this one was honestly the most Ravens Steelers game of all the Ravens Steelers games because you had crazy games defensively for both the Ravens and the Steelers. Weird turnovers, including one of the worst throws I've ever seen Russell Wilson make. And I know, Mike, the worst one I've seen was in the Super Bowl to give the Patriots a win, but just throws it up right into Marlon Humphrey's arms. And then Lamar and Justice Hill give it right back on an interception 2 plays later. Only 2 drives to the Ravens in the fourth quarter. Multiple, I'd say, boneheaded decisions from John Harbaugh, including not having Derrick Henry out there for your 2-point conversion, which you bring Derrick Henry in, and even if you don't play him all these snaps and run him all these carries, in the biggest moments, you have to have your stars out there, even if it's just for the fact that he's Derrick Henry and just the gravity that he brings to the table, because you let the Steelers off the hook. They all followed Lamar Jackson because they knew that's where the ball is probably going to go. The difference in the Bengals game last week was the fact that Henry was on the field. They ran a fake, and the entire Bengals defense fell for it. So even if Henry was split out wide, the threat of him being there was huge. So tough game for the Ravens to fall to 7-4, and I have a feeling that maybe next time these two teams meet could be for the AFC North crown.
It's going to be very interesting. I just saw the Hard Knocks trailer for the AFC North there. That looks like it's going to be a fiery thing. December 3rd, for all of you who want to know where that's going to be. John Butchko, Locked on Jets. Now, obviously, the Jets did not win this past weekend, but they're obviously in the headlines quite a bit. The big news is they fired GM Joe Douglas. John, your thought on this and really what direction is this Jets team is heading now in need of a new GM, in need of a new head coach. How desirable of a destination is this New York job going to be?
I would say not very desirable. I mean, I was joking on Locked on Jets that Joe Douglas reminded me a little bit of the episode of Seinfeld with George Costanza where he was avoiding his girlfriend so she wouldn't break up with him. That's kind of like Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas has been nowhere to be seen over the last couple of months. Robert Saleh gets fired. He's nowhere to be found. He's not speaking to the media. The Jets trade for Devontae Adams. Nobody hears from Joe Douglas. It was almost like he was avoiding Woody Johnson so that he wouldn't get fired. This was inevitable. He was in the final year of his contract. It didn't really seem like he wanted to come back because the owner was kind of taking control. The owner is the one that dictated the Devontae Adams trade. The owner did not really consult with him when they fired the coach. The owner took the lead on ending the Hassan Reddick holdout. It wasn't really clear Joe Douglas was in charge of this team. And there are a lot of challenges with this job. Number one, the cap situation is in a difficult spot because the Jets have borrowed a lot from future resources to try and build this team up as quickly as possible around Aaron Rodgers. Jets are also short on draft picks going forward. Again, trades that they made for veteran players. But I think the number one issue is ownership has been very erratic. And I think if you speak with GM candidates, what do they value more than anything? It's ownership stability. Because if you have a bad cap situation, well, you can fix that. If you lack talent, you can get better talent. I mean, I think anybody who's seeking a GM job understands that you're probably not going into a good situation. The reason the team has a GM opening is that they're not very good. Kansas City's job's not open right now. Baltimore's job's not open right now. They're happy with their GM candidates. You can deal with a bad situation. The question is whether ownership will stand aside and let you implement your plan. And this has been an ownership that's been very impulsive and very meddlesome. And I think that is the big issue the Jets are going to have going forward. And another issue is that Woody Johnson might be joining the incoming administration, which throws an extra layer of chaos into this because this guy's going to hire you, and then you report to somebody else. So you're the guy who you're not even reporting to the guy who hired you. So
Aaron Rodgers is who they're going to report to. There we go.
Yeah, that's who. When I heard that the Jets had fired their GM, I jokingly asked, "Oh, they fired Aaron Rodgers," because Aaron Rodgers has been behind a lot of the moves. Also, it's a mess right now. I mean, it's the Jets. It's interesting with the Jets because they always end up in the same place, but they always take a different path to get there. And this has certainly been a very unique path to get to the bottom of the league.
Well, we're going to continue our conversation here on today's AFC Squad show. We're going to take a look at some point differentials around the entire conference at this point and highlight some of the bigger performances we continue on here today on the AFC Squad show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's AFC Squad show is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports done the right way, and it's the best place to get real money sports action this season. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. If you think that Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards next week, or Lamar Jackson will have more than 1.5 touchdowns, cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app and use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Pre-Alcohol by Zbiotics. And Pre-Alcohol is a probiotic drink by Zbiotics. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So here's how you can use it responsibly. Step number 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, just like you make your Locked On podcast your first listen of the day. Step number 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step number 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed by 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. As we continue on today's episode of AFC Squad here on the Locked On Podcast Network, we're going to take a look at some of the tales of the tape here. When you look at the AFC based on point differential, it kind of paints the picture about how the stories are going for everybody around the NFL. We're also going to tie in some other games that we saw there in Week 11 into this, as well as some teams that came away with some impressive victories. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, since he's returned, the Dolphins have been cooking up a little bit as they're trying to climb back into the playoff race there at 4-6. They're a couple of games back of Denver, who currently has the 7th seed. But the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday Night Football also had an impressive victory over Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati Bengals, and a little bit of a shootout in a thrilling game. And no offense, Zach, no offense, John, but I was saying, thank goodness the NFL flexed out Colts Jets on Sunday night for that game. Though, even though Colts Jets had some drama up to the final 2 minutes, I don't know if it would have been that way in prime time there. But gentlemen, your quick thoughts on really those games that we saw there. And then if you guys want to touch on, I feel like I can't touch on the Broncos game specifically just by myself. I just feel like it just feels wrong to talk about it. But Bo Nix throwing 4 touchdowns against the Atlanta Falcons, ending as we, if you pay attention to the NFC Squad show, obviously Aaron Freeman over there says it is Kirk Vember. I think Kirk Vember is over. Bovember is now here. Broncos, they have their guy at quarterback. That's a fun thing to see. But let's talk about Dolphins-Chargers game, and then obviously we'll take a look at the tail of the tape here through the AFC point differential.
Man, I loved what I saw in that Chargers-Bengals game. I mean, you thought that, Bengals were done, that this was their year, and the Chargers get out to that huge lead, and, the Cincinnati defense. We talked about that last week on the show. It's like that Cincinnati defense, Joe Burrow's so good, and Jamar Chase is so good, and they get T. Higgins back. but the defense is just so bad. And the Chargers get out to that huge lead, and then Joe Burrow does what Joe Burrow does. He gets the Chase connection going, the Higgins connection going. And then it felt like no one wanted to win the game at the end. It just felt like, no, you take it. No, you take it. No, you take it. Like, it felt like no one wanted to win it. And then finally, J.K. Dobbins said, all right, fine. If you really want us to win this, I'll go and win it for you. And he had that huge touchdown run. The Bengals couldn't seal the deal at the end there.
Hail Mary almost worked.
It almost did. We've seen it work before this year. So, look, I think that this essentially sinks the Bengals. I know we were kind of talking about they have to win out if they want to even have a shot at the 7th seed, and I don't really think that's going to go and happen. But man, that Chargers Bengals game was something. And look, I think the NFL definitely made the right call, and I'm sure they're glad they did with how that game ended up going.
Well, you look at the point differential, Bengals at +1, 8th right now in the AFC when you look at it, and it has nothing like Joe Burrow. You look at that offense, no complaints. That defense, though, has been so bad. Even though they got Trey Hendrickson, who leads the NFL right now in sacks, it's weird to see the Bengals defense, especially a Lou coach team there, defensively struggle the way that they are. But and they're also dealing with now some injuries that are impacting them. They're not dead just yet, I don't think, but they are on life support and hanging on by a thread. Zach Hicks, let's take it to you as well, because the Indianapolis Colts are a team right now. They're still in the playoff hunt. There are a lot of questions. Hey, we're benching Anthony Richardson. We're going with Joe Flacco. 2 games into it. All right. We're going back to Anthony Richardson. There's been some ups and downs from this Indianapolis team. When you look at their point differential, -14. They're 9th right now in the AFC, right behind the Bengals. What is going on with the Colts?
A lot of things are going on with the Indianapolis Colts, but honestly, it could be a lot worse. I mean, when you look at the hierarchy of the AFC right now, there are essentially 6 teams for the playoffs that are pretty much locked in. And then you have a group of 2 to 4 teams fighting for that final spot. Your Denver Broncos, my Indianapolis Colts, and then you can maybe say the Miami Dolphins and the Cincinnati Bengals can be a little frisky there, but it really comes down to Colts and Broncos, I think, for that final spot. And they have a big playoff game coming up here in a couple days. Not this next weekend, but the weekend after. Essentially a playoff game for these 2 teams here. So I do think that the Colts are right in the thick of this thing. I think the Broncos are probably the better team right now, but it really just comes down to what kind of Colts team we're getting. Are we getting the team that just gets their butt kicked on primetime football by the Minnesota Vikings and gets a few lucky plays that makes it closer than what it is? Or do they get the version that they got on Sunday, which, again, their defense wasn't perfect, but Anthony Richardson looked like a legit NFL quarterback for the first time this entire season. It was such a drastic difference from what we saw at the early part of the season. He looked calm and confident and collected out there, delivering some really great strikes. And then down 8 going into the 4th quarter, it didn't faze him whatsoever. And he was able to get this team they're still in the playoff hunt because of how he performed in that 4th quarter. So the Colts are kind of a frisky team right now. I think they'd go either way. I will say one thing of note is they've played 6 teams with winning records this year, which include the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be the Detroit Lions will be their 7th team. The Houston Texans twice already. They played a lot of good football teams down the stretch here. It gets a little bit easier for them. They have the Denver Broncos. They have the Detroit Lions. Then they have winnable games. Not saying anything bad here about your team here, Mike. Patriots are a frisky little team as well, but they have winnable games if you want to be a playoff team this year. So the Colts, if they can take care of business, will be right there with the Denver Broncos come playoff time or come, right before playoff time this year.
Mike Debate, let's go to your New England Patriots here. I just feel bad. When I watch, I feel bad for Drake Maye, because I think Drake Maye, when you watch him, you're like, this kid has traits, but they don't have a lot of weapons around him. That, to me, is a little frustrating thing to see. They're -66 in point differential, 12th in the AFC. Your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I think right now it is about the supporting cast around Drake. I mean, you look at what he's been able to do with this team and really spread the ball around to multiple receivers, things Patriots quarterbacks have not done a great job of since Tom Brady left and went to Tampa Bay. So you're looking now at a quarterback that is capable of finding his receivers. But the problem is they're few and far between. Jalen Polk has essentially been invisible since being a 2nd-round pick this year. You can only play the rookie card for so long. Eventually, these guys have to start stepping it up. He has yet to do so. Demario Douglas has been a reliable weapon, but you saw a miscommunication between he and Drake Maye at the end of the game on Sunday against the Rams, led to an interception. In that situation, you want to miss long. You do not want to miss short, and that's what happened here. And I think in a lot of ways, DeMario, being the typical all-around field weapon that he is, maybe misread the situation, and I think Drake misread exactly what he was going to do. That's an amplified mistake, no question about it. But for the Patriots right now, I think the big surprise has been the defense really not being able to hold up their end of the bargain. That defensive line has been porous. There have been questionable calls made by the coaching staff, utilizing someone like a Christian Gonzalez, who was a lockdown corner, to try to shut down half of the field. That simply is not really working. They failed to adjust to either put him on Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua on Sunday, and they paid the price for it. So this team has to come into its own. It's about Drake Maye. It's about the supporting cast around him, but it's also the decisions that are being made in that coach's room that really will shape whether or not this team is able to rise above the problems they're having right now, Cody.
John Butchko, Locked On Jets. We take a look at point differential for New York, minus 38. They're 10th right now in AFC conference standing in terms of that there. I mean, obviously, we've talked about the offensive inconsistencies with them, but the biggest, I think, surprise is how much the Jets have regressed defensively this year. And look, I've said it as well in terms of covering the Broncos. For the Broncos to get John Franklin Myers for essentially a 6th-round pick, I felt like has been the steal of the offseason in terms of what the value he's bringing, and then knowing how everything went out with the whole Hassan Reddick thing. I mean, what's the biggest standout here for the New York Jets in terms of their point differential?
I think you hit on it. Is the Jets made a lot of bad decisions on the defensive line this offseason. It's really difficult to understand why they traded John Franklin Myers when they did. They said it was for cap reasons, but this is a team that really has kind of thrown caution to the wind with the salary cap the last 2 years. They say we're all in, and now we're trading John Franklin Myers because we can't get him under the cap. Well, they could have. There were ways to do it. They could have restructured the deal. They could have restructured other guys. He was a really important player for their defense because back seven of the Jets defense is all based on speed. They go with smaller guys because Robert Saleh, when he was the head coach, and now Jeff Ulbrich, they want guys who can fly to the ball. And the way the Jets were able to get away with that in years past was they had John Franklin Myers, who's about a 290-pound guy, playing defensive end. So essentially, it's almost like a classic 3-4 front. We have three guys who are 290, 300 pounds who can eat up blocks, and the back seven don't really have to shed blocks as much. It made the defense more structurally sound, but they also made some other poor decisions. They let a couple of their defensive tackles go in free agency. Leki Fatu, the defensive tackle they signed from Arizona, has not done a very good job as a run stopper. Javon Kinlaw has been, I don't know if he's been a disappointment because my expectations weren't super high for him, but they gave him $7 million guaranteed, and he's been a liability. Hassan Reddick, we could spend an entire episode talking about the Jets, trading for a guy who everybody knew wanted a new contract, a guy who was traded because his old team wouldn't give him a new contract. And the Jets thought they could get away with not giving him a new contract. And look, he's had zero impact since he arrived. The other issue, though, is Sauce Gardner is just not having a good season. It's not that he's having a subpar season for Sauce Gardner. He's been an average to below average corner this year. That's one I can't explain, but he's not been good this year. And when you have this sort of regression from your defensive line, and when your first team all-pro corner doesn't play like a first team all-pro corner, you're going to have issues.
It piles up there, and obviously, would you look at the rest of the point differential around the AFC? The Buffalo Bills right now leading the pack at 106. The Chargers coming at plus 75, Steelers at plus 71, and then obviously Kevin Ostreicher's Locked On Ravens plus 63. The Broncos, surprisingly, plus 52 with the way their defense is playing. The offense has started to click a little bit as of late, but that sets the table up here for Week 12 around the National Football League. Which teams right now in the AFC are heading into a potential trap game? Could the Ravens be in one? We'll debate and discuss here on today's episode of AFC Squad. Today's AFC Squad show is brought to you by our friends over there at Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it more wisely to improve yourself? Well, if you went back in school and you learned about maybe the Constitution, economics, and you need a refresher course, well, Hillsdale College is offering our listeners here are Locked On AFC Squad the opportunity to have access to free courses, including Constitution 101. The meaning and history of the Constitution, the introduction to free market economics, the great American story, a land of hope, and the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. On top of that, they have other courses that you can access. Like I mentioned, over 40 courses inside of their platform that give you access to things that could brush up your knowledge. Or if you haven't learned anything about it, you can learn for the first time inside for free. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever. You can tune in wherever you're at. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or you can just enjoy the lectures. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There is no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. We're taking a look around the AFC at what could be some potential trap games around the NFL this week, specifically in the AFC conference. There is one team that is playing an NFC team that, hey, could be a little bit of a trap alert here. Thanks so much for making all of these shows here on the Locked On Podcast Network your first listen of the day every single day. All right, gentlemen, let's go a little rapid fire here. We're going to focus on some games here. We're going to say if it's trap game or not. First off, starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road, taking on the Cleveland Browns. And every time, and I have prefaced this by saying the last couple of weeks, I feel like anytime there's an AFC North matchup, you can kind of throw how one team is doing out the window in terms of record, whether they have a bad one or a good one. They're always just combative, physical, and they always kind of fit the bill a little bit. The Pittsburgh Steelers, are they on trap or upset alert here potentially against the Cleveland Browns? I personally am going to say I don't think that they are. I think Cleveland is they're toast a little bit considering the things that they've gone through here. Jameis Winston's doing his best there. They've made some changes. They've got some injuries they're also dealing with. The Pittsburgh Steelers with that defense right now, Kevin, you saw it up close and personal this week. That's going to be a problem for Jameis.
I've seen both things up close and personal. I saw the Ravens fall into this Cleveland trap just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm gonna say it is because Jameis Winston can wake up and he can throw that ball like the best Tom Brady ever did, or he can throw that ball like Zach Wilson did in New York. It can be both things, and we don't know which Jameis we get each time. I think that's kind of the allure of Jameis, is he can be the best quarterback in the league one week and the worst quarterback in the league the next week. So obviously Pittsburgh's defense is better than Baltimore's is, and part of the reason why Cleveland was able to upset Baltimore is because of the fact that they could not stop Jameis. And I feel more confident just with the way Baltimore's defense has played for the majority of the season that Pittsburgh's can do a better job. But it's tough because you also have a couple of guys on that defensive side of the ball that can make an impact for Cleveland, but they're just so injured right now that if I had to guess, I'd probably give Pittsburgh the win, but I'm not counting Cleveland completely out based off what I saw happen up close and personal a couple weeks ago in Baltimore.
Another quick one for you here. The network, for some reason, has Baltimore at Los Angeles as a potential trap game this week. I don't know if I personally agree with that, but your quick thoughts on that, and we'll get everybody else to chime in as well.
I mean, my definition of a trap game is, one team's not very good and the other team is, and,
these are two really good teams.
Yeah, the one good team falls into the trap of not getting up to play the bad team. You're right. These are two good teams. Like, these are the 5 and 6 seed in the AFC right now, and I wouldn't classify this as a trap game for either team. I just think it's a really good matchup that deservedly got a primetime spot. And it's the Horrible. We got to get pumped up for the Horrible. It's another one, John versus Jim. That's going to be that's a storyline in itself. So I'm not labeling that one as a trap game. Baltimore and Los Angeles are two good teams.
You guys in agreement?
When you guys said Los Angeles, I didn't think Chargers because that wouldn't make sense as a trap game. So yeah, I don't think it's a trap game at all. I mean, Chargers are a good football team. They're a resilient football team, good defense. I mean, I know they had some issues this past week on defense, but for the most part, this is a really good game. It could go really either way. So yeah, I wouldn't classify it as a trap game, more of a primetime spot than to get excited about.
All right. Mike Debate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime you're facing Justin Herbert, I think to call it a trap game is probably a little bit of an insult on that level. And also, the job that the Chargers are going to be able to do. They're coached by Jim Harbaugh now. I mean, this is a team now that does have an identity at the coach's position. We heard Dave Drogemeyer talk about this a couple of weeks ago right here on the squad, Cody. This is a team now that believes they're going to be in any game that they face. And yeah, Baltimore is a hell of a team, and I still believe they're a lot better than what we've seen at times this year, and I still believe they're one of the elite teams in this conference, and they will continue to be. But the Chargers are eager to prove that they belong there, and they belong in this playoffs. They belong in this conversation. Yeah, I think this has got a very good game written all over it. I wouldn't consider it a trap.
All righty. John Butchko, how do you feel about this one? Because we also have a few other games too. that we can get to. I just feel like maybe I'm understanding it from the sense, Kevin, of Baltimore's conference record, maybe, right? If they drop it.
Yeah,
that
four AFC
maybe,
losses is not pretty. Yeah.
Maybe, but John Butchko, your thoughts here on Baltimore, LA, and then we'll obviously get to Kansas City at Carolina. Kansas City coming off a loss, Carolina finding a little bit of momentum here and there. I still don't think that one's going to be a trap game. If anything, I think Tennessee at Houston could be a trap game. And I think Denver at Vegas could probably be a trap game here. And I think the Colts potentially at the Lions. Like, the Lions are a well-oiled machine, but that could be one that people sneak up on. Your thoughts here, John?
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore 7-4. The Chargers are 7-3, and they're at home. So the Chargers have the better winning percentage right now, and they're the home team. I don't really see how it can be. I agree with everybody. That's a really good game. I actually go back to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, though, because I think there are a couple of elements that make that game interesting. I think, first of all, a Thursday night road game. That's always a bit of a tricky spot. That's always kind of an equalizer. I think you have the Steelers coming off a big win, so will there be a letdown? And also that Baltimore team, I think that Baltimore team probably took something out of them. So I think that's really the game I look to more than anything. I would also agree. I think the game you mentioned between the Colts and the Lions, that's potentially a tricky one for Detroit. I disagree with what everybody said earlier about the Jets and Colts being flexed out of Sunday night. I was disappointed because if I had to suffer that game, I wanted America to have to suffer through that. This is a Colts team that it's a Colts team that Anthony Richardson, he played well against the Jets. Now, I mean, part of it was he was going against the Jets, but he's a talented guy. If he can replicate that performance, he's very, very, very streaky, very up and down. But if he is the question, was it just against the Jets or did he catch fire? Because if he caught fire, that could be an interesting game.
It could be, yeah. Zach, your thoughts on that? Since obviously, your team, I know you and obviously Matt over there, Locked On Lions, my goodness, tongue-tied there, are going to do a crossover here this week that's going to release. That's a big game there, essentially.
Yeah, I'm excited you guys think that could be a trap game for the Lions. This is awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
You never know.
But here's my thing.
The Texans almost got him.
The Colts are a very feisty team. The Buffalo game I know is a 10-point decision by the end of it, but the Colts exchanged quite a few punches with Buffalo in that game, and it was pretty close until Joe Flacco forgot what team he played for and just started giving the ball to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, if Flacco just takes a kneel down on each of those interceptions, the Colts are in it at the very end of that game. Even look at the Minnesota game. If Flacco could even throw the ball forward, that game was going down to the wire as well. So, I mean, the Colts have been competitive with top teams this year. Houston, they've gone down to the wire with Houston this year. I mean, the Colts, every single game except for the Buffalo game has been a one-score game. So I'm not saying they're going to beat the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are a well-oiled machine right now on both sides of the ball. And I understand the 7.5-point spread. Honestly, I totally get it. But the Colts are feisty. I could totally see this being a game where if the Lions aren't at their best, I mean, the Colts could come in here, throw some punches, and do some good things.
Plus 159-point differential on the Detroit side. We had to switch up to the NFC graphics just for a quick minute. I mean, it really, it's not close between them and the Eagles. Like, that is a big drop-off. And then, obviously, plus 106, Buffalo there. So, yeah, that's going to be a very interesting matchup to watch kind of formulate. I think that, for me, I'm going to be upfront here. Like, the Denver Broncos have not beaten the Raiders in Las Vegas since they have moved there. And obviously they were on a losing streak against them prior to Bo Nix snapping that in week 5. But obviously with the Raiders playing, having a 2-8 record right now, they're in a position now they can kind of play spoils for some teams' hopes now at the end of the season. Brock Bowers is playing really good football right now. Very curious though, how the quarterback play is going to differentiate with Gardner Minshew. Obviously last time faced the Broncos, he ended up getting benched for Aiden O'Connell, and then Aiden O'Connell got injured a couple weeks later, and then it was Desmond Ridder for a little bit. We'll see how that is. But, for Denver, they're riding the high of coming off of a victory against the Atlanta Falcons, who are going to be a playoff team inside the NFC. They limited one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL in terms of yards and production. They're led by Kirk Cousins. They got to keep putting the foot on the throat, I think, in a situation like that and maybe kind of reclaim it a little bit, make the AFC West very interesting here once again. But Denver could, like I said, I do think the Denver game does fall into a potential trap game qualification here for the AFC here this week. But obviously, gentlemen, thank you so much for rocking with us here, joining and jumping in here on the AFC Squad Show. We're going to keep rolling it out every single week here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, if you want your team to be talked about a little bit more in depth, or you feel like we did them a disservice, voice your displeasure with your host for not showing up and not being here on the show. But with that said, we'll be back next week as well for another AFC Squad show here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.